Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are doing something a little bit different. We're firing up the time machine, and I don't mean a DeLorean, though that would probably be appropriate, and we are setting the dial for the late 1980s.
Right, and the very early 1990s.
Exactly. We're going to explore a collection of writings that really captures a very specific moment in history.
It does. It's a moment where you could argue the car was at the absolute peak of its cultural dominance.
Just before the real backlash started to, kick in,
Yeah.
we are diving into Clarkson on Cars.
It's a fascinating time capsule to open up, and I think it's really important to set the context for you right off the bat.
Okay.
When we say Jeremy Clarkson today, everyone has a very specific image in their head.
Oh, for sure. The global superstar.
Right. They think of the guy from Top Gear, the Grand Tour, or, more recently, the guy struggling to run a farm in the Cotswolds on Amazon Prime.
I remember, yeah.
But the source material we're analyzing today, this is the prequel.
That is such a good way to put it. This is the origin story.
It is. This is Clarkson before the megastardom. This is Clarkson, the newspaper columnist.
The working journalist?
The working journalist writing for Performance Car Magazine. He hasn't quite exploded into a household name yet, but the voice...
The voice is already there, fully formed.
Oh, completely. We've got a stack of essays here. Columns, car reviews, travel diaries. And our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the worldview that's contained in these pages.
Because it is a very specific one.
It's very specific, very loud, and very denim-clad.
It really is.
Yeah.
Reading through this, you realize this isn't just a book about horsepower or, torque figures.
Not at all.
It is a passionate, incredibly opinionated, and often hyperbolic defense of the motorist.
Yeah.
He portrays the driver not just as a commuter or a traveler, but as, like, a beleaguered species, a hero under siege.
That is the core theme. The motorist versus the world. He feels the walls closing in. So in this deep dive, we're going to explore his wars with cyclists and horse riders, his absolute bewilderment at the Japanese car industry,
His love-hate relationship with all the clunky technology from the 90s.
and his absolute refusal to accept environmentalism. It's witty, it's cynical, and he is deeply, deeply skeptical of anything that interferes with the pure joy of driving.
So let's get into it. Let's start with that hierarchy of the road.
Okay.
Because right from page 1, he establishes that in his world, the car is king.
Absolutely.
And everything else, pedestrians, cyclists, horses, buses, they aren't just other road users.
No, they're intruders. They are enemy combatants.
And he reserves a special kind of vitriol for the cyclist.
He really does. There's this one essay in the collection called Green Machine that I think just perfectly encapsulates his style.
Right.
He decides, against his better judgment, of course, to go on a cycling trip.
Which is the first mistake, obviously.
Obviously. He's in Cornwall, specifically looking to ride the trail from Wadebridge to Padstow.
Okay. Sounds nice enough.
And the way he sets this up is classic comedic storytelling. He's staying at a hotel, and he asks the woman at the front desk about the path. He wants to know what he's getting himself into.
Fair enough.
And she tells him, quite confidently, it is absolutely level. It's an old railway line.
Which sounds lovely. You're thinking, okay, a nice, flat, scenic ride along the coast, perfect for a holiday.
Exactly. That's what he's picturing. So he gathers his friends, and they go out to hire bikes. He even notes the specific brand. They're Dirt Fox mountain bikes with 18 gears.
He seems to think the number of gears is going to save him.
I think he does. But very quickly, the reality sets in. Level turns out to be a very relative term.
He describes hitting a gradient that he compares to Porlock Hill.
Which is no joke.
Right, and for anyone listening who doesn't know, Porlock Hill is a notoriously steep road in Somerset, England. It's a 1 in 4 gradient.
It kills cars.
It kills cars, let alone out-of-shape journalists. He says he felt like someone had tilted the countryside while he was having a pint in Padstow.
The description of his physical suffering here is just. It's visceral, he is not a fitness guy, and he knows it.
He leans into it.
He does. He talks about putting the bike in first gear and his legs spinning like a washing machine on its final rinse cycle.
You can just picture it pedaling furiously, legs blurring, but moving forward at about half a mile an hour.
Yes. And then he shifts up to a higher gear to try and get some traction. And suddenly, he says it feels like he's towing a 16-ton weight.
He claims his lungs just stopped working.
And that his hips were sending urgent messages to his head saying, "What on earth are you doing? Stop this immediately."
It's a hilarious image of a man completely out of his element. But here's where it gets really interesting.
This is where the Clarkson philosophy kicks in.
Right. He doesn't just say, I am unfit and this is hard. He twists this personal misery into a broad philosophical argument against the very concept of cycling itself.
This is where he gets creative. He argues that cycling is actually unhealthy.
His logic is fascinatingly twisted.
It is, he says. Okay, when you're cycling in traffic or near a road, you're exerting yourself. You're panting.
You're breathing deeply because of the physical effort.
Exactly. Therefore, you are inhaling massive amounts of exhaust fumes, far more than you would if you were just sitting passively in a car with the windows up.
He actually compares himself on the bike, panting away, to the car he was driving that week.
Which was an Audi 90.
And this is a key detail, isn't it? The Audi 90 was equipped with a catalytic converter.
It was. And this was the late 80s, early 90s, so cats were the big new green technology.
So his argument is that the Audi is scrubbing its own exhaust gases.
It's cleaning up after itself chemically. Meanwhile, the cyclist is sweating and panting and acting as a biological filter for all the toxins in the air.
He has that line about how the green cyclist is actually just a sponge for pollution.
That's it. He says if you cycle, you arrive at your destination dead, and your bike eventually gets thrown in a river to rust, polluting the water.
But if you drive the Audi 90,
he says, the herons wave cheerily at you. It's completely absurd, but it serves his narrative perfectly.
the car is the superior technology.
It's cleaner, it's faster, and it doesn't make your lungs collapse. He takes the accepted wisdom, bikes are good, cars are bad, and completely inverts it.
And he does the exact same thing with horses.
Mm.
I honestly didn't realize how much he disliked horses on the road until I read these essays.
It's a deep, visceral dislike, but it's not really about the animal itself. It's about what the animal represents.
An anachronism.
To him, the horse is an anachronism. It's a relic that refuses to leave the stage.
And he really goes after the establishment here. He targets the military, specifically the Blues and Royals Regiment.
And the breweries in London who still use horse-drawn drays to deliver beer.
Yeah.
He asks a very pragmatic question. We have a modern army, we have tanks, we have nuclear weapons. Why are we clogging up Hyde Park with cavalry horses?
He calls them animals that, in the modern world of warfare, are as pertinent as a bow and arrow.
He just sees it as performative tradition getting in the way of modern efficiency.
And he tells a story about riding a horse himself. He calls it a bison of a thing.
I love that. The owner described it as frisky, and Clarkson says that's like calling the comedy duo Cannon and Ball a bit not funny.
That is a very specific 90s British comedy reference.
It really is. But the core of his anger isn't the comedy, it's the entitlement of the horse riders.
Right.
He recounts meeting a woman who tells him that drivers need to slow down and get out of her way because her horse is worth 20,000 pounds.
And that just sets him off.
Oh, completely. He can't stomach that logic. He's thinking, why does the price tag of your hobby dictate how I use the public road?
He points out that plenty of cars cost more than 20,000 pounds.
But you don't see drivers expecting people to bow down to them just because they're in a Mercedes. It's a clash of cultures, the old aristocratic country set versus the modern motorist.
And Clarkson, being Clarkson, ends with that dark joke about the only use for a horse being glue.
He really goes for the jugular. But if horses are an annoyance, buses are the mortal enemy.
Oh, the buses. The Democratic Party essay is one of the strongest pieces in the collection.
It is, because he tries to use political theory to argue against bus lanes.
It's a clever bit of sophistry, really. He looks at the transport statistics for London. He claims there are roughly 9 million car users.
And only about 1 million bus users.
So in his mind, majority rules.
Precisely. He argues that democracy means the will of the majority prevails. So if 9 million people want to drive cars and 1 million want to take the bus, why are we giving the bus users special dedicated lanes?
He resents seeing those empty bus lanes while he's sitting in a traffic jam right next to them.
And he feels he pays his road tax, which, as we know, is actually vehicle excise duty, but he always calls it road tax, so he should have access to the whole road.
He calls the buses red oblongs that just clog up the arteries of the city.
He even claims that during a bus strike, traffic actually flowed better because the buses weren't there to block everything up.
Which is a bold claim.
A very bold claim. And his solution is typically extreme. He suggests, in that sort of modest proposal, satirical style,
So we should burn all the buses.
Exactly. It's hyperbolic, but underneath the joke, there is a real frustration. He sees the car as a tool of individual liberty.
The ability to go where you want, when you want.
And the bus represents the state, inefficient, collective, slow, and taking up space that belongs to the individual.
Speaking of threats to the car, we have to talk about his description of car crime.
Yeah.
Because reading this, you get a real sense of how bad the problem was in the UK in the early 90s.
It was an epidemic. Joyriding, theft from vehicles, it was everywhere. But Clarkson describes the thieves in a way that is, well, it's intense.
He calls them mutants. It's like a scene from a horror movie.
It is. He describes them living in sewers.
He says they emerge at night when the fog descends with their eyes glinting.
It's dehumanizing language, for sure, but it reflects the genuine fear and anger that car owners felt. You work hard, you buy a nice car, and then these mutants come and smash the window to steal your stereo.
He talks about the whole ecosystem of crime, how stolen stereos are traded for ecstasy tablets.
Which really grounds the essay in that specific rave culture era. But the detail that really stuck with me was his grievance about Honda Glass.
That is such a specific, mundane detail that makes the rant feel real.
It is. He says if you drive a Honda and get your window smashed on a Sunday, you are stuck.
Because the glass replacement companies don't stock Honda glass.
Right. He says you have to wait for the Monday morning delay, so you're driving around with cardboard taped to your window looking like a victim.
It adds insult to injury.
It's not just that they stole your radio, it's that they inconvenienced your Monday morning commute.
And his solutions are just pure fantasy violence.
Backroom boffin ideas, he calls them. He suggests armed guards at every manhole cover to keep the mutants in the sewers.
He suggests closing all the schools so that children can't learn how to pick locks.
It's a desperate authoritarian fantasy because he feels so powerless against this crime wave.
Let's shift gears,
Yeah.
pun intended, and talk about the technology of the era.
Yes.
Because this book is also a time capsule of gadgets. The mobile phone section is absolutely fascinating.
We forget how clunky and expensive the early days of mobile were.
Oh, completely. Clarkson details his setup. He has a Panasonic Vodafone installed in his VW Scirocco.
And he breaks down the costs, which are just eye-watering.
They really are. He notes the handset itself cost $1,774.
In 1989, 1990 money, that is thousands and thousands of pounds in today's money.
And that's not all.
No. Plus a 25 monthly standing charge just to have the line, plus 25p per minute for calls.
It was a serious luxury item. But he tries to justify it with this story about a dinner reservation at San Lorenzo.
The famous London restaurant, yeah. A hangout for celebrities and royalty.
He's stuck in traffic, running late for a date. If he misses the reservation, he figures he loses the table and, maybe the date. He estimates the dinner would have cost 80 pounds.
A lot of money back then.
So he uses the car phone.
He calls ahead to cancel or reschedule. The call costs him 10p. He argues that by spending 10p, he saved the 80 pounds he would have wasted on a missed dinner.
Therefore, the phone pays for itself.
It's man maths at its absolute finest.
But the actual experience of using it sounds terrible. He talks about the hands-free system.
Which wasn't really hands-free in the modern sense at all. It was a microphone clipped to the sun visor.
So he describes sitting in a traffic jam, screaming at his own roof to be heard.
And pedestrians looking at him like he's lost his mind.
Of course. Because back then, seeing someone talk to themselves in a car was rare. He looks like a lunatic.
And the danger aspect. He tells a story about trying to overtake a fast car, I think it was an Audi Quattro, while his mother's on the phone.
She's lecturing him about driving fast while he is driving fast.
And he's trying to shout at the visor while handling the car at speed. It just perfectly illustrates how intrusive this new technology was. It was a status symbol, yes, but it was also a burden.
Speaking of status symbols, he has a whole essay on executive toys.
Ah, the big boys' toys.
Like stuff people put on their desks. He mocks the Newton's cradle, the clicking balls.
The philosopher's knot, the suede rat from Fortnum and Mason.
What does this tell us about the era? What's he getting at?
I think he's critiquing the performative nature of 80s and 90s business culture. He describes these executives sitting behind massive desks with nothing on them but these toys and a phone they don't know how to use.
He prefers the simplicity of just asking a secretary to dial.
Right. He hates the complexity of the modern office.
But there is one gadget he actually loves. The Revenger.
The Revenger is peak Clarkson. It's a little box that makes sound effects. Machine guns, death rays, bombs dropping.
And most people would just, keep it in their pocket.
Yeah.
But not Jeremy.
Oh, no. He wires it up to a loudspeaker in the grill of his car.
Of course he does.
He wants to externalize his road rage. He talks about creeping up behind a Nissan Bluebird and hitting the death ray button.
It's incredibly childish.
It is. But it speaks to that feeling of powerlessness in traffic we talked about earlier. He wants to fight back against the intruders on the road, even if it's just with silly sound effects. It's a playful, aggressive fantasy.
We also get a glimpse into his organizational skills, or maybe lack thereof, in the essay about diaries.
He really struggles with the concept of the diary. He reviews the ones that are sent to him by car manufacturers.
And he dismisses the electronic organizers of the time, like the Scion.
The Scion. I haven't heard that name in years.
I know.
He hates it because the instruction manual is bigger than the Iliad. He just wants to write things down. But he has this insecurity about his schedule.
Right. He ends up choosing the Ford diary, not because it's the highest quality leather or the nicest paper.
No, but because of the layout. It crams a whole month onto one page.
And he loves this.
He loves this because if he only has 2 appointments in a month, the page still looks relatively full. He says it makes him look busy.
If he used a page-a-day diary, all those blank pages would just mock him.
Exactly. It's a funny, self-deprecating insight. He portrays himself not as a cool, jet-setting journalist, but as someone slightly disorganized who is worried about being unpopular.
Let's move on to the real meat of the book. The cars themselves and the industry that builds them.
Okay.
Clarkson has some very strong, very controversial views on how cars should be designed. And his number one enemy is market research.
He believes market research is the death of creativity. And he uses the Ford Escort as his case study.
This was the new Escort of the early 90s, which was widely panned by the press.
Yeah, it was not a well-loved car. He calls it the people's limousine, but in a mocking way.
And he says the problem is that Ford asked the public what they wanted.
And the public, being practical, said things like reliability, value for money, and economy.
So Ford went and built exactly that.
Yeah.
And the result was a dull car.
This leads to his famous fridge analogy.
I love this.
He says, if you ask people what they want in a fridge, they will just say, I want it to keep my milk cold.
Right.
They won't ask for a solar-powered titanium blender attachment because they don't know such a thing is possible.
His argument is that the public doesn't know what it wants until it sees it.
Right. He says the great breakthroughs in history, gravity, penicillin, they didn't come from men with clipboards asking people what they wanted.
No, they came from visionaries.
Exactly. He believes engineers should lead and the public will follow. If you listen to the public, you just get mediocrity.
He applies this same critique to the Toyota Celica. He tells this great story of the press launch in Cannes.
This is a classic lost in translation moment. The Japanese designers are trying to explain the styling of the car.
And they use phrases like organic rice to describe the curves.
And neutral sexiness.
Neutral sexiness, what does that even mean?
Nobody knows what it means. They claim the car looks like a naked woman or a cheetah. Clarkson looks at it and just sees a lumpy, ugly car.
And he actually admits to a conspiracy here.
It's quite Machiavellian. He says that he and the other journalists discussed it over dinner.
Okay.
They decided that if they wrote honest reviews saying it was ugly, Toyota would fix it. But they didn't want Toyota to fix it.
Why not?
Because they wanted European cars to win. So they decided to write positive reviews to lull the Japanese into a false sense of security.
That is wildly unethical.
It is, and he's probably exaggerating for effect, but it shows his bias. He respects Japanese efficiency, but he doesn't respect their soul.
He thinks they lack that artistic spark that European manufacturers have.
And that bias is front and center in the great Lexus versus Jaguar debate.
This is the core of his philosophy, isn't it?
Okay.
Soul versus perfection.
Absolutely. He drives the original Lexus LS400, and he admits, technically, it is a masterpiece.
He mentions the cold cathode instrument cluster, the silence, the incredible ride quality.
It does everything a car is supposed to do, perfectly, but he hates it.
Why?
He says it has no smell. It has no history. He compares it to nouveau riche money. He drops names like George Walker and Frank Warren, people who made money fast and flashed it around. He says the Lexus is for them.
And then he compares it to the Jaguar XJ12.
Which, let's be honest, was a dinosaur even then.
Sure. Old gearbox, unreliable electrics.
But Clarkson says sitting in it is like sitting in an old headmaster's study. It smells of leather and wood and history. It has atmosphere.
So his argument is that we buy cars with our hearts, not with our calculators.
Exactly. We buy what makes us feel good, what aligns with our identity. He feels comfortable in the Jaguar. He feels like an alien in the Lexus. Therefore, the Jaguar is the better car. regardless of what the spec sheet says.
He takes this defense of feeling over logic to the absolute extreme with the Mercedes S-Class.
The defense of excess.
The Mercedes 600 SEL, the grosser. It was huge. It had a V12 engine. It had double glazed windows.
And it arrived right as the environmental movement was picking up steam. People criticized it for being a dinosaur.
Brontosaurus, Clarkson calls it.
But he defends it. He loves the excess. What he hates is Mercedes' reaction to the criticism.
He tried to apologize for it.
Yes. They put out these PR statements about zinc conservation and recyclability. They were defensive.
And Clarkson says they should have just stood on the roof and shouted, "We have built the best car in the world."
He hates the guilt. He believes that engineering excellence shouldn't have to apologize to environmentalism. He wants progress to be about more speed, more comfort, more power, not less.
This worldview gets really tested when he travels. The segment on global car culture is so interesting because we see Clarkson completely out of his comfort zone.
Oh, his trip to Japan is a comedy of errors.
He is completely thrown by the culture. He talks about the charades of communication.
The extreme politeness just baffles him. He says people were bowing so low they were practically touching the ground.
And he can't get a direct answer to anything.
He asks a question, and instead of a no, he gets a sucking of teeth and this long, awkward pause. He finds it maddening.
And the factory tour.
The factory tour is amazing. He describes walking through a high-tech car factory and hearing the song When a Child is Born playing on loudspeakers.
And seeing tropical fish tanks in the middle of the assembly line.
It's completely surreal to him. And then there's the taste issue.
Yes, the lace antimacassars.
He gets in a Japanese taxi and sees the doily things on the seats and the crushed velour. He says the Japanese assume British taste is the same as American taste, loud and tacky, which he finds personally insulting.
It just reinforces his idea that while Japan can build machines, they don't understand style in the European sense.
But then he goes to Germany expecting order and efficiency, and he finds chaos.
The auto football story, this is great.
He's in Stuttgart, the home of Mercedes and Porsche. He expects everyone to be serious, buttoned-up engineers.
Instead, he stumbles upon a sport where they play soccer using old cars.
A giant fluorescent ball and a fleet of beat-up cars.
And he's analyzing it.
He's analyzing the tactics. The red team is using Opels. The white team has an Audi. He spots a VW Beetle with a dented bonnet that is perfect for cradling the ball.
And the Germans are just crashing into each other, cheering, having a blast.
It humanizes them for him. He realizes that underneath the stern engineering exterior, the Germans share his love for automotive mayhem. It's a moment of connection.
And he brings that anthropological eye back to the UK, too. He treats different British cities like they're different planets.
His regional breakdowns are savage. He describes London driving as survival of the fittest.
It's aggressive. People flash their lights to confuse you. It's a war zone.
Then there's Reigate, suburbia.
He targets the housewives in Siroccos.
He claims they use their rearview mirrors strictly for checking their makeup, never for looking at traffic. It's a total stereotype, but it paints a picture of that distracted suburban driving style.
And Birmingham.
The city of the automobile, but a nightmare to drive in. He talks about the expressway system that tracks you.
You try to go to the city center, and the road spits you out in Kidderminster, or gets you stuck on Spaghetti Junction.
And finally, the Yorkshire Dales.
The clash of speeds.
He describes the tourists, he calls them Ethel and Albert, driving their beige Austin Maxi at 15 miles per hour, looking at the scenery.
And then the local farmers.
Who know every bump in the road, flying past them in Subaru pickup trucks at 60 miles per hour. It captures the tension of British country roads perfectly.
We can't do a deep dive on Clarkson without addressing the elephant in the room.
The environment.
Exactly. This is where his motorist versus the world stance is at its most aggressive.
He coins the term green hypocrisy. He is deeply skeptical of people who claim to be environmentalists. He thinks most of it is just fashion.
He tells that story of his friend with a Toyota MR2.
This is a perfect anecdote to explain his point. His friend considers herself very green. She buys an MR2.
Right.
At the time, the MR2 ran on unleaded petrol, but it didn't have a catalytic converter. Clarkson points out that she could have bought an Audi 80.
Which did have a cat and was objectively cleaner for the air.
But she didn't want the Audi.
No, she rejected it because the Audi wasn't trendy.
And that drives Clarkson insane. He says she is polluting more in her cool car while claiming to be green, whereas the boring engineering solution, the Audi, is ignored.
He hates that environmentalism became an aesthetic rather than a scientific pursuit.
He also tackles global warming, but from a purely selfish perspective. He describes a heat wave in Welwyn Garden City, 102 degrees Fahrenheit.
He says the country just fell apart, the tarmac melted, the rails buckled.
And his argument is, okay, if cars are causing global warming, then car manufacturers have a moral duty to give me air conditioning to keep me cool.
It's like a protection racket.
Yeah.
You broke the climate, now you have to fix my personal temperature.
He praises the Hyundai Sonata because it had AC as standard. He slams Rover because they told him there was no demand for AC in Britain. He's pragmatic. If the world is getting hotter, I want to be cool.
And then there's the smoking. This is probably the most controversial part to read today.
The BMW ashtray saga. BMW removed the ashtrays from the 3 Series in an effort to be health conscious.
And Clarkson takes this as a personal insult.
He does. He launches into this incredible, twisted argument that smoking is actually socially responsible.
It's dark comedy.
It is. He argues that smokers die younger. Therefore, they save the National Health Service money on long-term geriatric care.
He says by smoking, he is a philanthropist.
And he dismisses the passive smoking complaints out of hand.
He compares it to passive football. He says, I have to put up with football fans closing the streets and making noise. You have to put up with my smoke.
It's a pure libertarian argument. He refuses to be inconvenienced by other people's health concerns. He wants the freedom to do what he wants, even if it kills him.
Finally, we get to the personal stories. The moments where the mask slips a little bit and we see the enthusiast behind the provocateur.
Yeah, these are great.
The story of buying his wedding car is a classic comedy of errors.
It humanizes him. He's supposed to be the car expert, the guy with all the connections, but when he needs a car for his own wedding, he can't get one.
He tries to borrow a Bentley.
Bentley refuses. He tries Land Rover. They send him a Range Rover.
But it's brown.
And his fiancée is not having a brown car at her wedding.
Absolutely not. So he's scrambling. And the best man who's supposed to be helping threatens to turn up in a Nissan Sunny ZX.
The ultimate humiliation.
It just shows that even for Clarkson, cars are a source of stress as much as joy. Things go wrong.
And that theme continues with the story of selling his Alfa Romeo GTV6.
Every petrolhead knows this pain.
Oh, yeah. The GTV6 is a beautiful, soulful car, but it's a mechanical nightmare, and he tries to sell it.
He brings it out of hibernation after winter, and the clutch is stuck to the flywheel.
So he has to drive it around to unstick it. Then the buyers start showing up. He gets the time wasters. He gets the Essex man with a bag full of suspicious cash.
And Clarkson has a moral dilemma about the cash.
He wonders if it's drug money, but he's so desperate to sell the car.
And then finally he finds a buyer, the Malaysian Dane.
A guy who wants to export the car to Malaysia.
It seems perfect. The deal is done.
But then the twist. They discover a Malaysian customs rule that bans the import of cars over 5 years old. The deal collapses.
It's a tragedy.
It captures the specific heartbreak of owning an Alfa. You love it, you hate it, and you can't get rid of it.
He also touches on toy cars again, but this time with a real sense of nostalgia.
The Dinky and Corgi models. He talks about the Buick Riviera with the dropping headlight. He remembers the specific features of these toys from his childhood.
And he admits to buying Barago die-cast models as an adult.
The Ferrari Testarossa. It shows that his passion started young and it never really grew up. He still looks at cars with that sort of childlike wonder, even if he wraps it in cynicism.
The collection ends with his farewell to Performance Car magazine. And he mentions a letter from a reader named Richard Morris.
This is a great moment of self-awareness. Mr. Morris wrote in to say that Clarkson was unfunny, self-indulgent, and annoying.
A harsh critic.
A very harsh critic. And Clarkson basically says, you win, I'm leaving. But he uses it as a chance to reflect on his career there, driving across Iceland, racing powerboats.
It marks the end of his print journalist era.
And the beginning of his TV dominance.
So bringing this all together, when we look at this stack of essays, what do we see? We see a persona that is part genuine enthusiast, part social satirist, and part provocateur.
The key takeaway for me is the tension. The tension between the emotional connection to cars, the smell of the Jaguar, the thrill of the Alfa, the freedom of the open road,
And the encroaching reality.
the reality of gridlock, safety regulations, and environmental concerns.
And Clarkson fights for the emotion, even when it's irrational. He defends the V12 engine not because it makes any logical sense, but because it feels good.
He predicted a future where driving would become miserable. He predicted gridlock. He predicted the war on the motorist.
And looking back from 2026,
He wasn't entirely wrong, was he? In many ways, the world he feared, a world of average speed cameras, congestion charges, autonomous electric pods, has arrived.
But these essays capture the last gasp of that unbridled, irresponsible freedom.
It's been a fascinating look into the rearview mirror. Whether you agree with him or not, you can't deny the passion.
Absolutely. He made cars matter. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into Clarkson on cars.
Drive safe.
See you next time.